Welcome to Conference of Movements, com26v.com. Today is Friday, November 20th. This is our last day of broadcast. And today we're creating a blueprint for the future. And today we have Chief Philip Scott here to do an opening prayer for us. Then we're open up to discussion, some important projects that Chief Philip Scott is working on, and a bigger discussion about the issue for, that we need to unite to protect our Mother Earth and for humanity. Chief Philip Scott, would you like to share who you are? And then afterwards, you can do an opening prayer, and then we could have a further discussion.
Yes, thank you, David. Very honored to be with you today. I'm known as Shokawa Kansapa, which is Lakota from Black Horse. I'm a ceremonial chief in the Lakota tradition, as well as in the Native American Church. And I'm the founder and director of Ancestral Voice Institute for Indigenous Lifeways. And our home base here is in the San Francisco Bay Area. Before we address sacred matters and to speak from the heart regarding the blueprint for our collective future, it's necessary for us to invoke the ancestors. The song I wish to sing for you today and share is a song to unify the hoop, to bring us together in solidarity. And then I will segue into a prayer after the prayer song. Wakantanka, great mystery, great spirit, dreamer of all dreams, that breathes the breath of life into all of creation. To our ancestors who dwell in the stars, who visit us in our dreams and walk among us, though we may not see them. To Grandfather Sun, who illuminates our path as human beings. To our Grandmother Moon, who casts and sheds her light in the night, also blessing us with dreams. To the Wakioyate, the Thunder Nations that have brought the sacred waters, our first medicine, here to the San Francisco Bay Area. To the sacred winds that blow, to our beloved Mother, the Earth, and to all of our relations upon her. Shoko Akan Salpa humbly expresses gratitude for my life, for the dreams that you bestowed upon myself and my relations last night, for the sun that shines in the sky, and for whatever weather phenomena my relations in this virtual hoop are experiencing in their lives. I pray for Warriors going to be chosen a health and happiness to my relations who dwell upon this earth, for their friends and for their families at this time. My humble prayer, Creator, that I articulate from my heart to you today is that we may truly unite in solidarity as a species, that we may come together to protect our mother, the earth, these sacred waters, the sweet air, so that all of our relations for 7 generations and beyond will be able to thrive. I pray that we may put down our pettiness, our differences, that we may honor the diversity of this world, the diversity, Creator, that you have created, that we may have peace in our hearts, that we may accept those who are different from ourselves, knowing that it is a sacred hoop, and that though we may sit opposite from one another in this wheel, we are still united together in solidarity through the center, through our hearts, to find ways to articulate our truths so that we can unite to see the commonality of our humanity, to honor the beautiful differences as well, but not to allow those differences to divide us, but to enrich our journey together. For that is a true community, not to homogenize this world with our perspectives, but rather to come together to see where we can share and negotiate to find equitable solutions that honor all beings, all parties. I acknowledge the spirits of the land, the indigenous inhabitants who have roamed this earth for millennia throughout this world, and that we may respect and honor and draw upon their wisdom and their ancient practices in this time of tremendous crisis, to understand the urgency of the actions that are required in order for future generations to flourish upon this earth. I acknowledge those that have placed their lives on the line for these sacred practices, for those that are protecting our earth, our water, our sweet air as I speak, for those that are placing their lives on the line in hospitals, the first responders, the physicians, the nurses, the EMTs, those that work other medicine ways, who are also serving the people collectively who are infirmed, who are suffering. For those that are ensuring that the networks of supplies are continuing to be distributed. Thank them for their sacrifice, for the actions that they are taking, though that it may imperil their own families. May we see the bigger picture here. May we embrace eagle vision about how we must come together to put down our differences, to come together to create an egalitarian society, a humanity that does not disenfranchise or oppress, but rather elevates and lifts everyone up, to remember our individual original instructions, as well as our collective instructions as a species, to protect our mother, the earth, to serve as responsible, loving stewards of her and all of our relations upon her. I humbly beseech us to come together in this time, that even amongst the indigenous nations, that we may stop the perpetuation of colonization, the internal oppression that was perpetrated and that continues to exist to this day now, to see how we can come together as Ikchewichasha, as human beings, as five-fingered ones, the way that you have dreamt it to be, Creator. May all of us, for the sake of future generations, in this urgent time, unite in solidarity. I thank my families, my mentors, and my teachers for the deep and profound wisdom they imparted to me, for the ancient practices that they entrusted me to continue to perform in service to all of our relations. Ahechetu alo, aho, mitakuye oyasi. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, relations, wherever it is that you find yourself upon our beloved Mother Earth. I'm very honored for the invitation from David and the other organizers of this conference and this bigger dream of unification, to be able to share my sentiments and my heart with you today. Well before Al Gore and Greta Thunberg called attention to the serious climate crises we're encountering now, many indigenous seers, prophets, and dreamers warned of this time that we're in now, of our unsustainable trajectory as a species through exhaustive consumption and assimilation of resources. And I use the word resources in quotations. This time has been prophesized by these dreamers, by these seers. And we truly are at a threshold. This is essentially a clarion call, and I see this virus, this elder, as the initiation of our species, that we must begin to conduct ourselves differently, that we begin to decolonize ourselves and to resurrect the awareness of our intrinsic indigenousness. Because each and every human being on this planet has come from indigenous peoples, regardless of where you are originally from. That our ancestors at some point in time, some more recent than others, had cultivated an intimate relationship with the earth, were able to live in balance with her and with the environment that they dwelled in. And it's this very wisdom and sacred practice, which involves a harmonization with the earth, of reverence and a respect for her as a living sentient organism, that is absolutely critical for our survival now. So the blueprint of the future is actually by remembering our past. Now, I'm not saying that we need to revert backwards. However, I'm saying that the accumulated wisdom of our humanity from our indigenous ancestors that had a relationship with her for millennia were able to live in harmony and balance with her is critical for our survival. For the modern age is certainly young in comparison to our ancestral wisdom and praxis. And I think it's important for us to understand that if we look at all of the origin stories throughout this world, that human beings are the last to be created, not the first. Therefore, we are the grandchildren. We are the youngest beings on this planet, not the oldest. So therefore, we are not the zenith and pinnacle of creation, but rather, being the youngest, we have the most to learn. And we can look to our elders, the elementals, earth, air, fire, and water, all of whom are living sentient beings. And the next, evolutionarily, the viruses and the bacteria, and the plants, and then the animal nations. That all of these beings are our elders, and we as the grandchildren may look to them for wisdom and counsel on how to live in harmony with our natural surroundings. This humility, I believe, is essential for us, right? If we continue as a species with hubris and arrogance, then we will continue to cause our demise, as well as the demise of many of our relations who also dwell upon her, right? For this is not about politics, nor is it about profits. It's about people. And what I mean by people is not just five-fingered ones, two-leggeds, but rather all beings on this planet, all beings according to many indigenous cultures, including in the Lakota language. We say Oyate, which means the people or a nation, and it refers to all beings, stones, animals, plants. So that is what is essential. Even the conversations about how we can turn a profit at the expense of the earth is problematic. And in fact, ultimately, it becomes a moot point if we poison our waters, our earth, our air, to the point that they are no longer able to sustain us, then the profits don't matter. The politics doesn't matter. We continue to create division, to reinforce and emphasize our differences, rather than coming together in solidarity, having even difficult conversations so that we can negotiate to find equitable solutions for the crisis that we are currently encountering, not only in relationship to this virus, but in relationship to the global changes that I had mentioned had been prophesized well before some of these individuals brought the Western science to light. It's gratifying to see that quite a bit of the science that is practiced in the West is reinforcing and supporting the indigenous wisdom and knowledge that has been known for millennia. So it's time for us to put down our differences. It's time for everyone on this planet to have a voice, to be recognized, as I said, to undermine the colonial agenda. And if we look ultimately at what colonization is about, it's about conquest. It's about conquering, the acquisition of land, the suppression and oppression of people, relentless consumption without reciprocity. And yet, inside each and every one of us is an indigenous heart and spirit. Because fundamentally, we all desire the same, which is to take care of ourselves, to ensure that our children have a future, to work together. Yet it's critical and vital for us to see this commonality and to use our intelligence to find solutions that are equitable, that change and shapeshift this compelling urge to oppress and dominate to one that lifts up and celebrates each and every one's life and intrinsic sovereignty. And how we go about this in a more pragmatic way is to begin to shift the narratives that have plagued our world now, which are often the product of the oppressors. A case in point is, next week is Thanksgiving. And the prevailing story that is told around the table is one that's based upon an absolute fiction. And it is this that I'm referring to, that we begin to change the narratives and the falsehoods so that we can see and speak and live the truth. The denial, for example, of the desecration of the environment must cease, must curtail these denials and these lies. And it's critical for us to be able to sit down and have these difficult conversations, to bring those whose voices were oppressed or suppressed or disenfranchised by these antiquated systems, the colonial agendas, if you will, to communicate with each other. And similarly, for this communication to occur also amongst the indigenous nations as well, so that the legacy of assimilation and genocide and intergenerational trauma can also be healed. Oh, I often think about what transpired in South Africa, the Peace and Reconciliation Commissions there vis-a-vis apartheid. I think about also the Peace and Reconciliation Commissions that occurred in Canada. And although ultimately they backtracked and much has not been accomplished through action, at least there was a gesture. There was a beginning to have conversations that were difficult so that the truths regarding these atrocities, these violations of human rights, could be brought to light. To be humble enough to express contrition, to apologize for actions that have harmed others, is the first step toward healing. To be able to open one's heart and to listen as another can articulate grievances and frustrations and indignation regarding actions that were taken to harm, can commence the healing process. And this is what is required now, that we begin to do the healing work necessary. And that means, therefore, that every single human being on this planet is willing to have the courage to excavate, to track oneself, to see the patterns and the addictions that may have been bequeathed to them, to their own families, through their own nations. For each and every individual on this planet is wounded in some kind of way, albeit some more than others, admittedly. But it's really incumbent upon each and every one of us to track and examine our own personal wounding, the ways that we have wounded others through our actions, through our words, our thoughts, so that we can truly achieve peace on this planet, so that our children, all of our children, and I mean that literally, will inherit a different future, a future that's based upon kindness and civility and respect and love, of reverence and respect for the natural world and honoring of the unseen, of the ancestors. And that is not a facile endeavor. It's not easy to dive into one's pain, one's suffering, to examine its genesis, where it came from. But that is the only way in order for us to liberate ourselves from these shackles. These shackles that bind us, and these shackles which also perpetuate the violence and the aggression into the future. Oh, the values that have been instilled in me from my indigenous families and mentors all involve love, respect, integrity, discipline. The discipline of the awakened warrior, which is not predicated and based on militancy at all, but on peace and the preservation of peace into the future. So when we can begin to examine our wounds, our pain, our suffering, which is often the catalyst for us to act out in violence and aggression ourselves, when we can truly eradicate these things and heal them and forgive those who have harmed us, and thereby liberate ourselves, where true forgiveness is freedom. We're no longer holding ourselves or others hostage to the past. Now, that does not mean that we forget what transpired, but rather we learn from what has transpired so we don't replicate it in the future. I once went on a hamblecha, which is traditional vision quest. Lakota hamblecha means crying for a dream. No food, no water, no sleep. 4 days, 4 nights. And I posed a question to the ancestors, to the Tokashalas, the spirits. And I asked, why are we here? Not why am I here, but why are we collectively here as a species? And what they shared with me is that at the moment when mystery merges with matter, we incarnate, we come into human form. And at that moment of embodiment, we are bequeathed 2 bundles. One bundle is the blessing bundle, and the other is the burden bundle. Inside the blessing bundle are all the gifts, talents, and favorable attributes of our families of origin, both maternal and paternal. Inside the burden bundle are all the wounds, traumas, fears, and issues of our families of origin in both of these lineages. Now, as we begin to move and crawl, gain the gift of language, these bundles burst open. And we have an opportunity to see the beauty that's in our families within that blessing bundle. But we also have a chance to see that which is not so honorable and favorable within our lineages. But perhaps a time comes in our life when we decide that we do not wish to carry on the legacy of that which is unpleasant or unfavorable. And so we commence the healing journey. And so we dive into that burden bundle, and we get a chance to see that which is not so pretty. May be very difficult and uncomfortable, but healing is uncomfortable. And we embrace that discomfort. And we utilize the blessing bundle, all of the gifts and attributes and intelligences, wisdom of our ancestors, as well as our own accumulated knowledge and wisdom and skills that we've garnered on the path, to extract 1 or 2 of these items within that burden bundle. Now, it's not possible to extract it all in one lifetime. For in fact, within that burden bundle is the accumulated trauma, wounds, fears, and issues of our entire humanity. And yet, if you are able, through perseverance, through devotion, dedication, and discipline, to extract a few of the items from that burden bundle, so that in time when you pass your bundles on to your own children or to mentees whom you may be teaching or training or serving, that the burden bundle is smaller and the blessing bundle is bigger. That is what the Spirit shared with me. So ultimately, we are here to heal ourselves, to heal others, to heal the future generations that are not yet in form yet, and to also heal our ancestors, many of whom are standing behind us, waiting for us to act in the way that perhaps they were not equipped to Either they were not aware of the issues or did not have the skill sets to be able to heal and liberate themselves. And this, for me, is our directive. If each and every one of us was willing to do the inner work necessary to liberate ourselves, it would be a very different society that we work and live in. And I really believe it is not a tall order. We all have this capacity to heal. It's intrinsic within the body, within our spirit, within our heart and our mind. But often, because human beings are fearful of change, fearful of the other, which is obviously a cause of a lot of our conflict and certainly the ground of genocide, that this fear of change, fear of the other, is often what compels people not to act in their best interest and favor, which then perpetuates the wounding and the addictions into the future. And frankly, we do not have the luxury of time any longer. It is really necessary for us to collectively act. As I mentioned about politics and wrangling, wanting to eliminate fossil fuels in 2030. One of the prophecies that was shared and imparted to me is that it is really necessary for us to remember our indigenous heritages, to learn how to take care of our own food through farming and hunting and fishing. Because one of the prophecies that was shared is that when the fossil fuels run out, and there hasn't been this necessary emphasis upon cultivating our intelligence to devise technologies that are more sustainable and environmentally friendly, that there will be a fundamental disintegration of the fabric of our societies because the networks will crumble if we do not have means of transporting services and goods to one another. And so, as a consequence, it will be necessary for us to begin to forge and form those bands and those communities that we once had in earlier times. Now, my prayer is that it doesn't have to get there. That we use our intelligence and our foresight and the wisdom of our ancestors who have transmitted these prophecies to us as warnings, that we can act now to circumvent those possibilities. And again, that means that we work together, that we put down our differences, we see our commonalities, and that we collaborate and cooperate with one another rather than compete. That may involve also shifting the entire paradigm away from capitalism so that we share these resources on the planet, which are becoming more limited in time. This is about allowing the best of our humanity to emerge. I'm reminded of a story that a journalist once asked Gandhi what he thought of Western civilization. And he said, I think it would be a good thing. In other words, when I think about my elders, it's not that we are human beings. Our humanity is based upon whether we do honorable acts. So we're not born a human being, but we become a human being through the way that we conduct ourselves. And when we engage in bravery and selfless service and sacrifice, we exemplify the nobility of ourselves in a humble way, then we're achieving that human beingness, that humanity. But when we continue to be self-absorbed, arrogant, engaging in hubris, when we are hoarding and not sharing, then these are things that do not honor our humanity and our ability to be a human being. So I enjoin all of us to truly exemplify and embody the best of who we are and who we can become for the sake of the children. This is a message that I wish to convey and share with you all today, because we are truly running out of time. And there must be an urgency to act, to let go of the rhetoric, to let go of the words that are empty, and to truly act for the welfare not only of ourselves, but all of our relations, future generations on this planet. I often think in terms of our elders, the elementals, the viruses, the bacteria, the stones, the minerals, the plants, the animals, who are sentient living beings, how they regard us. For the reality is, at this point, I think we have forgotten our original instructions and are rather self-absorbed, rather self-important as a species. And it's necessary for us to change that so that we can come back in proper relationship with one another, with our earth, and with all of our relations. At this time, I will send it back to you, David. If you have any questions about what I've shared or wish for greater elucidation or clarification, I'm certainly happy to elaborate upon anything else I've shared here. But it's been an honor to speak with all of you, and I know that we have a little bit more time, so if you have any questions, David, I would be honored to answer them.
Yes, thank you so much, Chief Philip Scott, for that, sharing that wisdom with us. We live it. Myself, David Cam, Sherry Lewis, and Mesfin Zaid, when we set out on this journey, we knew that it would not be easy. It's not an easy journey. It's because the world has been so divided. You can see, what our message of love, bringing all the indigenous nations together to create a new federation of nations, of that unity consciousness, is extremely difficult because there's a lot of historical trauma that has happened, genocide, actually sterilization of women that stopped if you believe it or not, in the 1970s it stopped. So it's not like a past. It's very, very recent. And then indigenous people not having the rights to exercise their religious freedom, their language and their culture, and being punished for it, actually, for speaking their own language or practicing their own culture through residential boarding schools. What's happening is that all that trauma is coming to bear, and indigenous people are becoming the perpetrators themselves. Not all of them, but some of them, that they have practiced through colonization. They are becoming the new dividers of people, of their own people, and between tribes. And I don't know how to resolve that, because by us trying to bring indigenous nations together, we have taken on a lot. And of course, we have been attacked also for trying to do that by not only dividing us three peacemakers internally, but externally through our allies and stuff like that, that, do not allow this unity to happen. What then I look at the consequences if the unity fails. We're going to just go back to basically the way it was. But we're not going to let that happen no matter what, unless all three of us have put our lives on the line to make this happen, and put our reputations, put our financial status and everything on the line to make this happen. So I ask that whoever hears this message, including yourself, to stand with us and to stand with all the ancestors and dreamers that want to be a part of the unification, to stand and to not only stand with us, but to make it happen, to bring, the way I see it is not it's an invitation that we're sending. What I call it, Chief Philip Scott, it's a potluck dinner. We ask everyone to bring something to the table, and then we can share in that potluck of dinner. We're not leading it, saying that we're going to cook everything for you, and then we prepare the table for you to come. We're inviting you to bring a piece of your potluck. Means that you bring a piece of your culture, your language, your even your resources. It could be anything. It could be resources, could be a gift of love, a gift, a hug, a smile. Those are things that we can share that is totally what we call non-physical, that we can give. A lot of times say, I'm poor, I don't have the money to give anything, but you can give a smile, you can give a compliment, you can give the gift of love, you can give a hug, you can give a smile. Those are the things that you can give, and it's unlimited. You can keep on giving that, and there's no limit. A lot of the times, a lot of the times, how come there's this unity? There's many organizations in the past that has been trying to unify the tribe, including the Great Peacemaker from the Haudenosaunee, who brought 5 warring nations together, and they added a sixth one, the Tuscarora together. Then there was Tecumseh, who brought approximately 24 nations together for that unity. Why can't often it actually, I think it was semi-successful for a period, but then it stopped. Why did it stop? For example, the Great Peacemaker at 6, and why did Tecumseh stop at 24? And in fact, that often when you look at the history, Chief Phil Scott, their own people turned against them. Tecumseh, um, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, they were killed by their own people. When you look at that way, it wasn't outsiders. It's basically the colonizers that have colonized the minds of the indigenous people to attack their own leaders, their own people, and that's what's happening now. Is that how do we heal that? That there's internally, even at Standing Rock, you can see what happened was that there were infiltrators of their own people infiltrating the Standing Rock movement to that was paid or colonized or whatever. There was their own people that actually infiltrated, and a lot of them broke up the movement. And that's why I'm shocked by it, but I'm not surprised by it. So how can we heal that, Chief Philip Scott, so we can move forward on not ahead of you, not behind you, but at the same time?
It's an important question to pose, David. What I'd like to share is that, just for clarification, the peacemaker, Tecumseh, they stopped with those nations because that was the geographic area, right, of the region that they were in, right? So there were the 6 nations that were there. One thing about the peacemaker, it's not that he was killed after the unification or during, but rather he was tested by each of the nations to determine if his message was worthy and he was worthy to convey it. But as a result of his discipline, his sacrifice, his conviction, and him enduring the tests that each of these nations presented, he obtained their respect, and that's how he was able to unify them. And that unification still exists to this day. So what we're really ultimately talking about here, and I think it's important not to get distracted, that yes, there were agitators, there were detractors within the encampments at Standing Rock, but if we see the much bigger picture, and this is where we have to use our eagle vision, we have to see that 700 nations from all over the world came together in support and solidarity of the Standing Rock people. And when there is a vision and a mission that is honorable, then there will be that support. That said, there's always going to be, this is where dialogue and conversation are essential, right? So 700 nations came together in support of that mission. And then, of course, there's going to be outside agitators as well as perhaps internally, just like, the colonizers amongst the French and the British, for example, in the 6 nations, attempted to divide the people, just as they did also with the Lakota and the Pawnee, right? So they would scouts into each other's territory for both economic incentive as well as brokering treaties that the colonizers would eventually not honor. Again, so that's just manipulation. And so what happens is, as a result of that manipulation, that assimilation, and the continuation of intergenerational trauma and wounding, there's victimization that happens. And that victimization then also becomes the aggression that I was talking about. So when people are victimized, they often will become the victimizers. And we see this in human nature across the board, regardless of where you come from, right? That as I mentioned in my sharing, when people are willing to see the ways that they are victimized and wounded, then they can begin the healing process and therefore not perpetuate that wounding and that violation and that aggression into the future. A perfect example was my Lakota mother. She was abducted from her family and placed in a boarding school. Right? And she shared with me, that she would see, her peers' tongues cut for speaking their language. She spoke of the rape and the sodomy of the children by the missionaries, right? These atrocities. And she was rather tight-lipped about her own personal experience, but she did share with me what she witnessed. And the beauty of my Lakota mother is that while she was alive, she forgave. And she truly lived mitakuye oyasin. And that's the Lakota word of all my relations, right? So she understood that we were five-fingered ones, that every single human being is that we are all related, not just to our two-legged brethren, but to all beings on the planet. Literally in every cell of our body, to understand that we are related. That if you truly see another as a relative, then you will not harm them. Yeah. And my Lakota mother exemplified that. She truly lived mitakuye oyasin. And she did her forgiveness work. There were certainly people, the missionaries and the educators who harmed her, right? There was the trauma that she had of being abducted from her family and placed in these schools. And yet she was able, through the ceremonial way of life, to heal and to forgive, so that she would allow all people to participate in the ceremonies. She believed that Chanupa Wakan, the sacred pipe, was for Ikchewi Chasha, for human beings, not just the Lakota and Dakota, Nakota, Oyate, the Arapaho, and the Cheyenne. She believed that the Chanupa was brought by White Buffalo Calf from Te Sanwi for everyone. And so their Sundance is open to all people, so that when we invite people from all nations to lie on that bison robe, if they have the dream to dance, and we pierce them, everyone's blood flows red. That's what it means to be a human being, right? That we all cry saltwater tears from the mother ocean. That we all have the capacity for deep love, for compassion, for forgiveness. And this is what we can do to forgive those who have harmed us. So again, we liberate ourselves from being a hostage to the past. And it's not easy, but it's essential. If we wish to unite and ensure that all of our children have a future, and to stop the divisions amongst, to honor the nations, but to stop the tribalism that's keeping beings in isolation and in conflict and militancy with one another. And so, I hold my Lakota mother as a pillar of the embodiment of what's possible when people are willing to heal and to forgive, and therefore to embrace with love everyone. This is what's possible, so we can truly live mitakuye oyasin. Now, that does not mean that we don't have our differences, but it's possible to agree, to disagree, and still be in this world. Because the Creator has created all of us with a unique perspective and in a field of diversity. So we may not necessarily agree, to concur with one another, but that does not mean that we don't belong here. And in fact, healthy communities, invite differences so that there's a richness and a perspective that everyone brings. We're all spokes of the great wheel and hoop of life. And we have a right to be here. Each and every human being has that right, has the capacity to articulate their voice and their perspective, right? And as I said, the peacemaker encountered challenges. The three of you are encountering challenges. Why? Well, fundamentally, because you're talking about change. And this change will always be met with a certain degree of reservation and resistance. And this is where we embrace perseverance, right? That, you think about, Tashunka Witko, Crazy Horse, right? That he didn't give in, he didn't capitulate until it was clear that his people were starving. And then he went to Fort Robinson. But he was the last, along with Sitting Bull, to hold out, right? And as you rightly stated, Tashunka Witko, his Crazy Horse, knew that his own people would cause his demise, and yet he still fought for them till the very end. Yeah. And think about Martin Luther King Jr. Think about Gandhi. All these people who had a dream and a vision to change the world. And they did. And they also encountered tremendous opposition, ultimately causing their death as well. But this is the conviction that anyone who is a dreamer must be willing to embrace. That if we're going to be a change maker, you're going to encounter resistance and opposition. Your life may even be placed on the line. But are you willing to die for your dream? These individuals that I've cited and that you have cited did just that. That the dream and the vision of unification was more important than their individual life. That's what it means to be an awakened warrior in this world. Your vision, your dream that the three of you have is an honorable one. And you will be, up against, the resistance to change, as well as intergenerational trauma. And oftentimes from the place of woundedness, people will act out of fear, out of resistance. But when the message is pure and true, people will come together, just as what happened in Standing Rock. The 700 nations uniting to prevent that black snake from contaminating the land and desecrating holy lands. And now, as a consequence of the continued fight in the courts, there's a moratorium on the flow of oil through that pipeline. And now the tribe is asking for the removal of that oil in the pipeline while the next year an environmental impact statement is reevaluated. So ultimately, there are favorable emergences from what occurred at Standing Rock. Not only the unification of the people of 700 nations, but also the resurrection of the 7 council fires of the Lakota, right? The blueprint, if you will, for future activism toward water protection, air protection, earth protection. All of these things were favorable developments as a result of the confluence of many people. 10,000 plus people convened on that land in the name of our mother, the earth, and in support of the Standing Rock people of that nation. So we must persevere. In times of tribulation and difficulty, this is our time when we have faith. My Lakota mother would get up every morning. She would rise before the dawn, and she would stand facing the east. And she would sing this song. And I'm going to sing one push-up of this song for you now, because it's relevant. Hey, oh, ay, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, ay, oh, yeah, wa, yellow, hey. Wakanta kan shemalayo he makakijelo he o chano pakile leyo ha ho ye wa yelo he. She would continue to sing that song until the sun would rise above the horizon, and tears would stream down her face. And the essence of that song is basically say, Creator, I ask you to have mercy and compassion upon me. Having some challenges in my life, but I know that through the red road, through the Chanupa way, the sacred path, the sacred pipe, I will prevail. So we align with our faith, with our conviction, with our relationship to source, earth, and ancestors, so that we may endure whatever adversities we encounter. So continue to stand strong together as a triad. Continue, as you had mentioned, to invite allies to stand with you, and cultivate the patience to know that it will take time. Just as Martin Luther King Jr. stated, right? He says he'd seen the mountaintop, but he knows that he's not going to be able to accompany them. He knows it was going to take time, but he also saw his own death. And my prayer is that you have individuals that protect you and watch your back, just like every chief that I know has his or her warriors. And you need to find those who can watch your back, protect you, so that you will be able to fulfill this dream and this vision that you have, that you received. Because it's necessary, as I said in my sharing. We need to put down our differences for the sake of the children, for the sake and the survival of this earth. That is what is key.
Thank you so much, Chief Phil Scott, for sharing that. So we will close it out for this deep sharing and wisdom that you have provided us. We'll keep standing strong. And thank you for your encouragement of myself, Sherry Lewis, and Mesut Zaid, who are all of us, three of us, are facing difficult times, not only personally, but other things. So, and we'll welcome you back again in the future. And do you want to say something short before we leave? That final message?
Yeah, my final message is to express gratitude, right? Gratitude for the challenges and the adversities that temper us, right? So it's our adversities that galvanize us and that allows us to grow strong, right? So when they arise, we embrace them because that is the springboard for our awakening. So I honor you and your colleagues, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this conference as well as this bigger dream that you are undertaking. And I know that there are others who also respect and honor this endeavor. And so my prayers continue to be with you and all of us together as we strive to unify this world for the sake and the welfare of all of our relations upon her. Aho, mitaku yoyasi.
Thank you
Aho.
so much. Aho. So we will have, I think we'll have a break first, then we'll have next guest come on. So thank you very much. We're just ended.